Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Tom Stewart here. I'm with Liz Trotter, and this is Smart Business Moves. Our guest today is Doug Yntema. He's a financial planner, does strategic planning, and is very active in the M&A world, does a lot of work with franchises. We're lucky to have him here today. Hey, Doug, how are you?
Great. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
This is going to be fun. We're going to learn a lot of things that are of interest to cleaning business owners for sure, especially in 2022, going into a new year. It's always nice to have some idea as to what your business might be worth in the event that you have a liquidating opportunity, as they say, or need.
So I have a question. You said M&A. What's M&A?
Mergers and acquisitions.
M and A. Okay. I got you. All right. I don't know why at first I heard you say MMA, but Doug really does not look like.
No, not so much.
But before we jump into that, though, Liz, do you know what today is?
Jolts report?
It is.
Yay.
How did you know that?
I don't know. I just trying to keep track of this stuff now.
Okay.
Doug, is this something that you would look at since you're thinking about all the time valuation? Do you ever look at the Jolts report?
I'm not familiar with that.
Well, you will be after today. Tom loves to run us through this little thing.
Okay.
I'm just trying to figure out how to make my computer work. How's that look? Okay.
That's good. You're going to have to zoom in, though, Tom, because, my huge screen, I still can't see any of them.
My goodness. Okay.
There we go.
There, yeah. Now we can see.
So basically, what this is telling us the number of job openings month over month. So, from an employer perspective in the residential cleaning industry, we've been talking about being supply constrained for as long as I can remember. There's been a labor shortage and too much demand, not enough labor. And this is one of the metrics that we look at, that the thinking is the fewer job openings there are, the better chances there are that somebody looking for a job will take the job that you have. So the number, and they're always a month behind. So they just released the October numbers today, and it's 10.3 million, down from 10.6. It was over 11 million a year ago. And the other part of this is the unemployment number, how many people are looking for a job. And that's around 6 million the last time I looked. And job numbers are going to be coming out Friday for November. So there's still like over 1.5 jobs out there for everybody looking for a job, which is moving in the right direction, but it's not in an awesome place yet. You go down here to like leisure and hospitality, which could be a market that we'd be drawing from. Food service could be another. The openings actually went up in food service. They actually are flat in leisure and hospitality. So while the job openings are going down in some industries, maybe not necessarily in the industries that would mean the most to us.
Yeah, they are. All of them are down over last year, though. Same time.
Yes, they are.
Which is good. That's good news.
That's better than them being up.
Yeah.
The complaints from the hiring standpoint with sellers is definitely starting to turn around. A year ago, it was really, that was the number one reason people wanted to sell their businesses. They were just tired of the labor market.
Oh, wow. So that
seems to be improving.
Surprising, should it?
No, last year was tough.
Yeah.
So, Doug, introduce yourself to our audience and just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Sure. I'm a business broker, and what that means is I help buyers and sellers come together on business opportunities, and I've been doing it for quite a while and kind of fell into a specialty of franchise resales. So working with owners of businesses to help them prepare for sale and then market the business. It's a little different than a non-franchise business as far as you're having to not only find a buyer for the business and put that deal together, but you also have to get them approved to be part of the franchise. So there is a little bit of expertise in that area. We work with a lot of the major brands, and typically we'll have quite a few for sale throughout the country. And because we have a lot of them for sale, we get to talk to a lot of buyers. So it's helpful for us to really understand that market. I happen to love the cleaning service businesses. When people are looking to buy a business, a lot of times they're leaving corporate America, or they're re-entering, like maybe they had, a family that they're raising, their kids are a little older. It's a nice business hour job. You don't have the hassles with calls in the middle of the night and having to have retail and inventory and, all the different things that can go along with different franchises. And you really don't need to be a brain surgeon. I'm sure your viewers probably feel differently, but it's not a complicated business. It's really keep your employees happy, keep them staffed, keep the houses clean, and you're going to have great reoccurring revenue. I've sold businesses that I've had customers for over 20 years.
Is that the pitch you give prospective buyers?
I do, because a lot of times they think, I don't want to clean a house. I don't want to do that. In a lot of the franchises, that's not what you're doing. You have teams that go out and clean, and you're really recruiting and handling the business. And you get them out in the morning and you bring them back in at night. And it's really I have a lot of people that will work 20, 30, 40 hours a week, owning their own business and still be able to take time off because of the staff. So it's a pretty easy business to get into. I think the franchising part of it helps. I don't know how many people in your audience are independents, but when somebody's going to let someone into their home, they feel a little more comfortable with a national brand.
Yeah, we have a mix. I mean, there's independent companies and there's franchise brands both that are very active in the industry and watch our show as well. It's interesting that you mentioned the nuances of doing brokering sales with a franchise brand, because the prospective buyer, I guess, has to meet the criteria of the franchisee that's selling the business as well as the franchisor. So there's a longer approval process, I would assume.
There is, and we find that a lot the brands that we mainly work with validate very well. And what we mean by validate is you don't want a buyer to be excited about the numbers but scared to death because they hear horror stories about the brand. And that's part of the value of your business is being part of a brand that has been around for a while, has a good track record, that's going to validate well. They're going to be able to talk to other owners. And for the most part, we don't run into a lot of problems with that because of the industry. It's not a super complicated industry. So it really comes down to that they feel that paying the royalties are going to be worth it to be part of that brand and get that assistance. That usually helps put the deal together. It's not just about the numbers.
I'm curious, who do you typically see wanting to buy cleaning businesses?
It's a pretty large spectrum. Most of the time it's people that want to leave corporate world, or they don't like their job and they want to be self-employed. We get a lot of people who are later in their careers, early 50s, and don't want to put in another 10 or 15 years into working for someone else. Potentially want to work with a spouse or a partner in growing something. And they're attracted to this type of business because when you buy a new franchise, you have to take the time to build that up. And, there's not only the investment for the franchise, but then you have to go out and build your teams and everything. And when you're buying an existing franchise, you're going to have that immediate cash flow. So on day one, if you have 200 houses that you clean every week, that's going to be cleaning that same week. So if you come in, you don't upset the apple cart, you're going to have a nice steady cash flow. So people are looking to replace their income, and be able to earn a good living. And sometimes there are turnaround situations a little bit more for a variety of reasons, including health. And that's when someone like me comes in and talks up the brand and has them talk to other owners that are successful within the brand or in the industry, to just talk to them and have them better understand what the potential is.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're selling, for example, a Mary Maid's franchise, right? And they're struggling to, the buyer is nervous for whatever reason. And then you would have them speak to other Mary Maid's franchise owners. Is that correct?
Yep. So we go through the franchise disclosure document and we go through the discovery process with corporate. But we also look at the industry as a whole and look at, where they should be fitting in that range. Franchise disclosure document, I don't know if people are familiar with that, but there's different fees that are associated with the responsibility of the franchisor is, and they also have earnings claims. And you want to go, it's a legal document, and people are always scared of legal documents.
Yeah.
And they're sometimes not that well done. So you really want to, the first question anybody asks when they're looking to buy a business is, how much am I going to make?
Yeah.
How much am I going to make? How much am I going to make?
Yeah.
And we can't give guarantees on that. Nobody can, because who knows how that operator is going to be. Mm-hmm. So what we do is we try to look at the data that's available and show them the potential. And the other part about buying an existing business is there's a cake recipe. And if you follow the recipe, if they're successful, just follow that recipe. Don't come in and upset everything and change everything. If a seller of a business is doing well, then do that. If they're not doing well, then talk to the brand on what they need to do and other owners to find out what they're doing to be successful, and then copy that.
Okay. I'm just writing my little questions down here.
No problem.
All right. So I have a bunch of questions, actually. So let's say that somebody wants to know how much money am I going to make?
Mm-hmm.
And what are some of the typical answers that you would expect? So here's why I'm asking this question. So many times when I have seen people buy businesses, or we ourselves have bought businesses, that you lose a good chunk of that. You can expect to lose a good chunk of those clients over the course of time. Do you run into that situation when you're dealing with franchises?
So we try to look at a 3-year financial history.
Okay.
And it's not just the tax returns. What we look at are the overall owner benefits. So we take the profits of the business along with the salary that the owner or owners are taking. If we would have to replace one of those owners, if somebody came in, we'd have to make replacement wages for that. We add back in amortization, depreciation, one-time expenses that may come up that aren't ongoing, to try to really create a picture like, okay, their average seller's discretionary earnings. And typically what I see, our businesses, our average sale is are probably around 150, I'd say, is kind of what they are. I've had cleaning franchises sell that are way higher than that on earnings. And, we get some distressed ones where they're making 50. Yeah.
So, and what you were describing is owner benefit. So the value that the fee paid for the business would be some multiple of
Yep.
that owner benefit.
Exactly. So we get that 3-year average and we say, here's where we are. And then we can look at the FDD averages and say, are you in the bottom third, right in the middle, or the top third?
I'm sorry, what type of average? The FTD?
Yeah, from the FDD, there's earning claims in there. So
franchise.
Oh, not the
franchise disclosure document.
Got it. Okay.
Or just in general, if it's not a franchise, we look at that 3-year average to decide where you are, what the upside potential is, and then what is it going to take, what sort of investment would be required to get there. and then that helps you decide how to structure an offer. But typically, cleaning franchises will sell anywhere from 1 to 4 times that seller's discretionary earnings, depending on a lot of factors, including location, brand, whether the sales are going up or going down, or whether there's an easy explanation as to what happened. Maybe the seller got sick or lost a key employee or something happened. So we do our best to really dig into the financials to be able to tell the story to buyers.
You mentioned brand. I mean, I'm not going to ask you to like give me names or anything, but are all the numbers being equal, or just some brands demand a higher multiple than others, just based on the name?
There are better brands than others, but that's not really as much of a factor as the trajectory of the sales.
Okay.
And things like location. So I'm getting the heart of the labor market, some of the states that had bigger COVID shutdowns and things like that. If there's high regulation areas, people get a little bit more nervous than if it's in a state that might be a little bit easier to do business in. So
Texas versus California.
Oh yeah. So and then we get into minimum wage and everything else that goes with it. I mean, it's not a surprise with cleaning companies with labor. It's always an issue. And one of the interesting things we've seen, and I don't know if you've noticed this, but we had a lot of sellers that were extremely nervous about increasing their rates because they didn't want to lose the customers. And we found out that we got very little pushback on that. People were really pretty much understanding that cost of labor went up, and we didn't see the drop off of people just saying, I'm not paying that increase. So it was a pleasant surprise of the industry, I think. Have you seen that?
Yes.
Are you talking about like this year?
The past 15 months.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Definitely not.
I mean,
so that's kind of helped the bottom line. It was kind of a year ago, it was kind of going a little squirrely. In August of last year, we were getting a lot of calls that I can't get anybody to show up because they're walking across the street and getting a higher wage. And some of those have kind of started to wash out a little bit. And, it's always been a need. And I think it's going to continue to be. And I'm surprised by the demographics of the age of the customers that are hiring. We're getting a lot of from the discussions with our sellers that they're finding a lot of the younger people with families even are paying the dollars to get their house cleaned professionally twice a month or once a month.
Yeah.
But on a regular basis. So I think once those, you get somebody in their 30s or 20s that are having a cleaning service, are they all of a sudden going to change their mind and decide to do it themselves? So even more reoccurring revenue for down the road. So good industry.
Yeah, we were just talking about that on a call yesterday, that if you're having a lot of customers that are telling you that that they have to cancel service because of money, you need to hit those people hard, because nobody that's had their house cleaned for the last year is going back to cleaning their house themselves, whether they think they will or not.
Right, exactly.
They really believe what they're saying. That's not happening.
And I had a one brand sell, and she was a very, very sharp operator. But when she bought an existing franchise brand and raised the rates like a lot. And she said, I'm not going after everything. I want to be able to pay my employees more than anything else for their time. And if we get fewer customers, it'll wash out in the end. And it was amazing what her numbers actually grew to. And she's since resold the business, but it wasn't a deterrent. So you sometimes think the best business model is to have the best prices, and sometimes it's not always the case. Now she had a demographic that had a large supply of more wealthy people, but she kind of said, I'm not the cheapest when they'd call. So she was quoting them. And it worked out. So
And,
that's
and
the
you
other
know,
nice thing about franchising is you can kind of network with other owners and understand what they're doing.
yeah, I mean, it's a calculation. If you're doing a rate increase of a certain percent, and you can estimate what percent attrition you're going to have off of existing customers, and if you do it right, you wind up making more money and cleaning fewer homes doing it.
Right.
That's really the sweet spot.
Yeah. It's all really about, she was very good at coaching and mentoring the workers. There's a franchise brand out there. It's in the junk hauling space, but we do a lot of resales for them too. And it's that's a similar labor pool, getting people who want to pick up junk and throw their back out lifting furniture. It's a high turnover industry, but they've developed a very good program with having a very clear path. And the seller that did very well on her resale did the same thing. She had when they came in to interview, this is your first step. Then you're going to go to you're going to be a team leader. Then you can go to this. And she had a path. And then she paid very well with bonuses for recruiting family and friends. And then she paid them retention bonuses. So if that employee stayed for a certain amount of time, that person got a spiff and the employee got a spiff. And her, I was shocked at her tenure of employees. She had some that were there 10 years, stayed on after she bought it. So there's always creative ways to go about it. But those are the kind of things that when you look to sell, it's the cash, the number of contracts, and the quality of your employees, and they're buying future cash flow. So the more we can assure them that it's a really well-run franchise, the higher multiple you're going to get.
So it's the owner benefit that is kind of the heart of it, but other metrics, I guess, such as employee turnover, maybe customer churn, what has the growth rate been over the last few years? There's a lot of other numbers that go into it as well. So if I'm thinking about selling my business, and some of this would translate into an independently owned business as opposed to a franchise as well.
Yeah.
I guess you probably need to start planning for that a couple of years in advance. You don't want to wake up one morning and say, I think I'm going to sell my business.
Yes. So you never know what the economy is going to do. And I think education is very important. And some of the brands, we do exit planning webinars similar to this. They can show the people that are thinking about selling. But some of the key things to look at is steady financials and growth, and then understand that how evaluation takes place and what we add back. And then from there, if you just use the very simple metric of 3 times that, so you might be a little bit less depending on what's going on, or you might be a little bit higher. But I'll have people call and they say, I want to retire and I want $850,000 for my business. And I'll say, okay, what do you think your seller's discretionary earnings? And we walk through a process to calculate that. And they'll say 150. That business is closer to 450 than 800. So if they want to get to 800, they're going to have to get another 100,000 to that bottom line.
Right.
And that, isn't always what they want to hear, because they want to cash out, but that's pretty much the reality. So if someone's thinking about exiting, it's frustrating for them when they're making 150,000 a year to say, I could make that in 3 years. Why would I sell that? And I say, well, that's good. Keep it another 3 years then, but don't burn yourself out and start making 100,000, because then you're only going to get 300 and you lost 150 and had it for a longer time. So that's where it gets interesting. Our particular program, we are month-to-month contracts. So we sometimes have a valuation that comes in a little lower than the people we're hoping for. And we go through the valuation process, give them an idea, and then we can go to market. And if we're not getting the offers they want in 2 years, they can pull that back. And then in a year or two, when they're ready, we just have to update everything and we can jump right back on the market again. But it's a nice way to test it, and not get stuck in having to sell, because nothing speaks more than how many offers you're going to get, right? So sometimes we'll tell our valuations, I think, are better than a lot of just asking your accountant, because your accountant isn't talking to buyers. You know, I talk to buyers every day, and I know what they're thinking and what they're concerned about. And it's not a magic 3 times your seller's discretionary earnings, which a lot of accountants and valuation people, if the sellers, I really want to get 800, they'll say, oh yeah, I think you can get that. You know, they don't care. They're not talking to buyers. So our valuations come in, we were at 86% last year, within the high, medium, and low range on the businesses we sold.
What does that mean?
So when we give a valuation, we give them a high, medium, and low range, and we suggest the medium.
Okay.
And of deals that closed, we were within that range.
Oh, 86%.
9 times out of 10.
Okay.
So it's valuable for sellers to really understand how the selling process works and what they're going to get for it.
Can you explain a little bit better about, you had said that you're going to kind of use the 3 times just as a benchmark, but you had said earlier that it could be anywhere between 1 and 4 times. What would be the difference between somebody that's getting 1 time and somebody that's getting 4 times?
So the multipliers are always considering debt-free and no cash. So no money in the bank or anything like that. So we're starting just on what is the likelihood the person's going to make every year. So some of the reasons that we have a lower one is illness, where they're sick, their employees are gone, they've gone from 300 houses to 80, and they can't do anything, and they tell me, I need to get this sold in 30 days or 60 days, or I'm going to be closing the doors and get nothing.
I got
So
you.
then we try to make it as attractively priced as possible. If it's a distressed sale, it almost comes down to an asset sale. And a lot of times distressed sales like that will sell for less than what somebody would start a new one for. But people are apprehensive because the sellers will say, well, the territory alone is worth 75. The territory alone is not worth 75 if you only making $15,000 a year.
Yeah.
If they're buying the cash flow, they're not buying what it would cost to start over. So there's a different mindset that people have to get into. But things that can drive the value closer to the 4 are solid numbers, earnings, where it's better than a job earnings, because people want, if they're going to spend the high dollar on a multiplier, they want a very good return for that extra investment. And some brands have autos, some don't. So if you have a fleet of 15 Toyota Corollas out there that are already all branded and everything, you're going to have a little bit more value added onto that multiplier than if you don't. Sometimes we'll have real estate involved where I want to sell my building too. And then that definitely will dramatically increase the multiplier. But those are, it's really difficult to ever say this is the average, because there's so many circumstances that can fall in. If you're a passive owner, you're working 5 hours a day or 5 hours a week, just kind of doing payroll and checking in, and you're spending 6 months in Florida. Yeah, you're going to probably get a 3 or 4 times multiplier because everybody wants that. Who doesn't, right?
Yeah.
If I could make $100,000 a year paying a manager and only working 20 hours a month, yeah, I'll pay extra for that.
Right.
So it's a lot of circumstantial with each business to really kind of hone it in.
So you're talking about deals that, can be multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars,
Oh yeah.
I guess there's some buyers out there who have access to that type of cash and they can just show up and do that. But I imagine you have other buyers who want to own a franchise cleaning business, but they need some sort of financing to help
Mhm.
them do that. So could you speak to a little bit what financing options there are in some of the transactions that you do?
Sure, I'd be happy to. This gets back a little bit into the multiplier question. The SBA, which is backs a lot of small business loans, they underwrite them for banks that write the loans. If a company is losing money or not making very much money, they won't lend. So when you take the ability to get a mortgage out or a loan out of this scenario, you're down to cash, and that can force people down to that lower multiplier also. If you are very good cash flow and we can service the debt. So remember, our calculation of seller's discretionary earnings does not include debt. Okay. So if you currently are paying a loan on your business, that's something that we add back into that seller's discretionary earnings because we don't know what the buyer's loan is going to look like. And then we do what's called recast it with the bank. So if you're making, let's say, 150,000 without any debt, and you're now going to have a $30,000 a year payment, now you're making 120,000 a year. So the cash flow has to be there, and if the numbers work out like that, it's very easy to get lending. The other way to buy a business is using retirement funds, which a lot of people will do because then they don't have that debt service and they have increased income right away. And the other way is to do a combination of cash down, some loan, and then maybe seller financing. And people get very nervous about seller financing initially, but I always tell people to keep an open mind about it because you're doing the buyer a favor. And when you do somebody a favor, you're going to get a higher price. You are taking on a little bit more risk, but you'll be getting some interest income on that. And potentially spread capital gains out over a period of time, which can be advantageous. And look, you're going to get to know the buyer during the process. So if somebody comes along and says, I want you to carry 20% or 30% or 40% as a seller note over 3 years, and you meet them and you think they're going to run them into the ground, you don't have to do it. But if you meet them and say, this person is perfect, corporate loves them, I think they're going to be awesome, then you're much more willing to do that. So there's lots of different ways to finance a business. Most buyers will want to come in with as little down as they possibly can. There are net worth requirements from some franchisees that they have to meet, and we pre-qualify those. So we work very closely with the brands, and we know what their requirements are. And when we're pre-qualifying the buyers, we talk to them. And it's the same with independents. There are a lot of people out there who don't want a franchise. And we advertise our listings blind, which means it'll just say cleaning business for sale in whatever state. Here's the earnings, here's the asking price. And sometimes a buyer will fill out a non-disclosure agreement to get the information, and they'll say, sorry, I don't want a franchise. Those are independently minded people. So there are people that, if you aren't part of a franchise and you're thinking about selling, there are people that are looking for those types of businesses. They don't want to be part of a franchise.
Okay. Could you speak to that a little bit? Because I always find that topic interesting. You mentioned that, the franchisor has a say in this process as well. And you mentioned that there's financial requirements, some objective things that they're looking at. Is there more of a psychographic component of this as well, where they're trying to figure out if, from a values and motivator standpoint, that this candidate would be a good franchisee in our system?
Yeah, yeah, and we coach the buyers as well as the sellers on they're being interviewed to become a franchisee. So don't just go to the franchise and say, where do I sign, or what do I have to do, or get me this, or I don't like these terms, because they can say no. It's a relationship. You're going to be with that franchisor for a long period of time. And yeah, you have to get approved by the franchisor, but they all, the franchisee also has to be comfortable with them. So when we introduce people, we give them tips on what questions to ask, and then also to present themselves in the best light. Because if you come in and you say, I want to run the business completely passive, and I don't have the net worth requirements, and you have to give it to me, that doesn't go over well with the brand. So there's a little bit of coaching that has to happen on both ends to make sure that everybody's doing what they need to continue the process, do their due diligence, but get it over the finish line. And let's face it, some people are abrasive, and they're not, they're not going to be good when you interview them. Nobody's going to work for him or her.
Yeah.
So the franchisees say no, and it can be upsetting to sell, or the franchisors say no. And that can be upsetting to sellers because they feel like they got stabbed in the back by the franchisor. Here I had a buyer and I was finally going to be able to retire, and they got in the way.
Oh yeah, I didn't even think of that.
So
before, the franchisor is protecting their brand.
Yeah, that's why dealing with, it's a shame, really, that there's not more education done by the franchisors on how to exit. It's just not their focus. And I don't know why. I think it's a selling point when somebody buys a new franchise, is to tell them, run this business for 5 or 10 years, and you're building a valuable asset that you can sell. It's a reason to buy that franchisee. And for whatever reason, when somebody says they want to sell and they call it these franchisors, the franchisors just say, well, find a broker and let us know when a buyer comes. And they're not legally allowed to do a lot of valuation calls and things like that. So I understand part of it, but it puts the franchisees in a bad situation where they, Google business broker near me and find a guy in their town or a girl in her town that's a sales, is a business broker, and they may sell car washes and restaurants and a million other things. They don't understand franchise resales. So find someone who knows franchise resales.
All right, most of our people are not going to be, hey, germ wizards, are not going to be franchises, but definitely
still want someone to understand the business.
Right, to understand the industry, right?
Yeah.
All right, so it's you're speaking to one of my questions here, is if somebody is thinking that they want to sell their business, what are some of the things that they know they need to do or to get into place, that they need to be thinking about before they call a broker?
We have a website, and I can give you the URL later, but it's called the Franchise Resale Readiness Assessment.
Wow.
Yeah.
.com?
No, it's just a link on our website. But it's a series of questions that we ask.
Give us your website real quick, Doug, and Tom will look it up. He'll post it real quick.
The our website is smallbusinessdeal.com.
Okay.
But once we talk to someone, that's when we send them this questionnaire. There's no cost for it, but it gets them thinking about how buyers are going to look at their business.
Okay.
It's a planning tool, and it asks some things about the upside and the downside. Our website, we have a very large mergers and acquisitions, so I focus on the franchise resales, but we have a lot of different businesses that we represent. But the idea behind that assessment is to get them to understand the process. So first of all, understand what they need to do. And one of the biggest things they can do is have very good financials, and know what their expenses are, be able to document them. A lot of people will do owner benefit things like cars, but they'll lump it in with the other cars, or they'll have travel, or they're, buying home supplies and stuff that can potentially be a valuable owner benefit, but they're not separated clearly in the financials. And if financials are hard to understand and justify, it causes doubt in the buyer's mind and in the lender's mind on what the actual cash flow is. So number one takeaway of anybody who's thinking about selling is keep extremely good profit and loss statements. And when a buyer calls and says, what is this bill for? You have to know what it was for, and then we can decide if it's going to be an ongoing expense or not. So we need clean numbers. So if somebody's thinking about it, just make sure that they're working with an accountant to keep everything very clean and be ready to be able to provide those numbers. The higher multiply businesses, the ones that sell for the most, they have clean tax returns that match their profit and loss. And so many times I'll get a tax return that shows a negative $15,000 because they wrote every single thing off, but they're telling me they made $100,000. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't take away tax advantages. It's just clearly show what those tax advantages are and how they're not going to be a new ongoing expense or a continuing ongoing expense for the owner. So clean financials is one thing that they should do. The other is to go through the valuation step where they are now, to get an idea of what they think it might be worth. And then if they have a number in mind that they want to sell for, we can tell them what they're going to need to do, what kind of numbers they're going to have to hit to be able to get that multiplier. Those are the two most important things, is to have very clean financials. And sometimes we got to do a lot of cleaning up before we can go to market, because it's just, there's too much doubt.
And you mentioned earlier, Doug, sometimes the deals that you do with the lowest multiples are distress sales. So, I'm sure you see that more than anybody would want to. And would you say there's a lesson to be learned there, that none of us are going to be running our businesses forever, and we really don't know when a day might pop up that we need to sell our business. So do you recommend that we're always thinking about keeping these records and conducting business in a way like we
keep it as clean as you can, because you never know what's going to happen. And the number one cause for a business not selling or selling extremely low is bad record keeping.
So if you're thinking that you're not going to sell your business for the next 10 years, still keep the records clean.
Absolutely, because the longer you can show steady cash flow, the better. And I mean, we could do a whole other hour on the chicanery that owners get up to in their books. But when there's a big surprise, you might be going down the road, and they're gonna uncover, different things that people might be trying to add back, let's say. So I had an owner, for instance, he put his child support payments in as something else and wanted to add those back in. And how do we know how much they were actually spending in advertising when he's saying that he spent $36,000 of the advertising budget was for the child support payments? So, he wanted to add those back in. And then he didn't have any of the records to show how that was. And then, it just can get really, really complicated for buyers and lenders. And you have to be able to show what that future cash flow is going to be. in a very clear way to get the highest results. So if you're planning, just take the extra time to make sure that everything is clearly separated. Don't lump everything into one thing. Don't, I'll have people that will put ask my accountant, and they'll have a box of those, and then we can pull those up and look. But don't have three categories: payroll, advertising, and maintenance, because you really need to know, well, if you have 130,000 in maintenance, what is that for? And if you have to dig through and really try to figure out which one's which, and it makes it very complicated. And it's part of what we do in the initial valuation stage, as we go through and we try to look for things that are going to be questioned. And we get the answers ready before we go to market. So when a buyer asks the questions, we know the answer.
So this is a little bit different question. One of the things that we talk about a lot with the business owners that we work with, they always want to know where their money should go. When they're filling out their, how do they classify their money, the money that they take from the business? And what we usually tell them is, if you are working in your business and you are actually filling a job, like if you're acting as the general manager, for example, then the amount of money that you take for that job should be included as part of the expenses, but it should be approximately the same amount that you would pay a general manager. So if you're taking $300,000 a year, but you know that you would only pay a general manager maybe $110,000, we usually tell them put the 110 as expenses and take the other couple hundred from your net profit. Is that wise?
Yeah. And I'm not an accountant, so I don't want to.
Specifically just talking
always double check what everybody says, but what we see typically is lower payroll salary, and then a lot of our companies are S corps, and there's a lot of tax advantages to being an S corp, and then you can have that pass through income, so you're not paying Social Security on that. The other thing that is good about having it priced approximately to what the replacement manager is it's easier to calculate what the income is going to be if you take that out of the equation. So one of the things with the seller's discretionary earnings is you take the earnings of the business and the payroll and combine those along with some other things to get the seller's discretionary earnings. It's real easy to say, I'm paying myself 110, but we think you could get somebody to be a manager for 80.
Yeah.
Then we would only add back in that $30,000 difference to the earnings. And then the expectation would be that they're going to have an employee in there, and that would alter the cash flow a little bit. And if they want to be the manager and continue to take the 110, then so be it. Then they'll earn more, and they might be willing to pay more for it. So.
Okay, that makes sense.
But clean books, valuation, steady employee, steady sales. One of the things that happens with people who aren't prepared or thinking about it, and they do get an illness, it's probably the number one distress type thing, or a divorce happens, or the economy turns and you have to get rid of it. If you don't have clean books and you don't have an idea of what your business is actually worth, it creates a lot of doubt and fear in people, and then they don't decide to move forward and list it, and then it just continues to deteriorate. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to owners that had really nice businesses but didn't like the valuation we were giving them, and then their situation just continued to get worse, whatever the situation may be, whether it's employees or market forces or what have you. And then unfortunately they end up not making very much money.
Can you speak to how COVID has impact, because so many people are, everybody's records look different right now because they're getting PPP loans, and they're just they lost business. They were shut down for 6 weeks or whatever. How is that impacting things?
So the banks we have to take PPP money out of the cash flow.
Okay.
So if you got a PPP loan, we have to take that out. But what we try to do is normalize it. And we're through the pandemic now. And what we like to see and what lenders like to see is 2018, the sales were here. 2019, the sales were here. 2020, they were here. And now 2020, they were back up pre-COVID. That's a very good sign. So then they'll take that 2020 and say, more than likely, since 17, 18, and 19 and 21 are all similar or they're heading the right way, we won't wait as 2020 as much. If you have 2020 and you had a terrible year, don't think that it's gonna completely hurt you as long as you rebounded. I had a lot of people, in different industries that have not been able to get back to pre-COVID numbers. I would say that was the case for a while in the cleaning business. But in the last 6 months, I've seen that the numbers returning a little bit more steady. I think people are more comfortable having people in and out of their house again. As the industry and as a whole, COVID in the long run might have helped because people are more conscientious of keeping their houses clean. A lot of people work from home now and want to have it cleaner, so they're more. So yeah, 2020 and COVID did impact the industry, but we're coming out of that. So as long as your numbers are trending in the right way, you're going to be in good shape.
It sounds like people are kind of giving a pass to 2020. Like,
Yeah, they are now. But it was scary for buyers for a while there because, really frustrating for sellers because you just didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah.
But overall, the sector has bounced back very nicely, and there's certainly demand for cleaning, especially. I don't know if you guys get into janitorial stuff, but those sell very quickly.
So how is the M&A market for residential cleaning companies compared to, maybe 2019, 2018? What can you say to the supply and demand for cleaning businesses?
I think due to the recurring revenue feature of it, the only real negative that people are concerned about, and you touched on at the very beginning, is employees. And as that improves, I think the overall demand is going to continue to stay strong. It's probably towards the top of our franchise resale demand. We get a lot of requests about it because you can have so many different people get involved. It's not like you have to have a real special background, and the hours are good. When somebody's looking at a restaurant franchise, you better know what's happening and be able to run it because restaurants can go sideways quickly. Yeah. This is a business that you can get into and, have some assurance of what your cash flow is going to look like. They're not one-offs. You're not constantly hunting the next sale. Once you get a client, you can count on that. So because of that feature, it's very attractive. So there's good demand for the industry right now, for sure.
So do you, when you're doing the valuation then, Doug, do you separate out the recurring revenue from the one-time revenue, or do you even?
Yeah. So if you go to our listings page, and then go to business for sale. Down in there, you should be able to check cleaning companies. If you go up, well, let's just stop on one here. There's one right there, Profitable West Michigan Cleaning Company. If you click on that,
read more.
Yep. So if you go to the right there, and I don't know if it's too small, but up on the right, you'll see what they're asking and then what the cash flow is on it. That cash flow is the seller's discretionary earnings. So they're taking home 109, and they work the business quite a bit themselves. So the revenue is 289. They're asking 225, and it hasn't flown off the shelf. Anything that has right around that 100 or less cash flow are a little trickier to sell than if you're north of 150. There's a little bit more room for error and still be able to pay your bills when you have higher cash flow. So those tend to be a little bit more, but this is a typical ad that we have. This is a really small one. But that's normally what people are going to see when they're looking at business brokerage sites. And it doesn't take long for a business buyer to start doing the math. Oh, this is 100 grand and they're asking 225. That's a little over a 2 times multiplier. If they see the same ad here and it says I'm going to make 100 and they're going to be $400,000 they want, they're going to say, ooh, that's not as good, and they're going to just move on. And that's where there's some stickiness to that right around 2 to 3 range.
We are at the top of the hour, so
we are.
Doug, we've taken your URL and we've dropped it in chat. If anybody wants to know more about your services, would you be willing just to have a conversation with somebody?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's what I do. So I don't know if you want to put my contact information in there too. They can give my cell phone a call or shoot me an email, and I'm happy to give them. We usually talk to someone before we go through the resale program or the resale assessment tool, but that is free. So if they reach out to me, they can get a hold of me there too. That's our corporate number. My cell phone is probably the best way to get me. That's a direct line.
Okay, what is that?
It's 616-299-0222. And my email address is doug@smallbusinessdeal.com.
Okay.
Perfect.
And yeah, I have a way to book calls, and we can talk about it. And if it's just planning or just questions, it's a long process. We don't, push anybody to make any quick decisions on this, but if they do have individual questions and want to learn more about the process, I'm happy to help them out.
Awesome.
Okay.
Well, Doug, thank you so much for
Thank you. Appreciate
sharing
it.
with us, your knowledge and expertise in this area. I think this is the first time. We've been doing this for a few years. This is the first time we actually had somebody on our show that is in the business of doing M&A in the residential cleaning space. So
it's part of owning a business. The days of the kids taking it over are gone. So you have to have that as part of the equation. And I find that owners of cleaning businesses are usually pretty organized people and like to plan. So don't be afraid to start thinking about things like that for retirement. It's a valuable asset. It really is. So it's not something to take lightly when someday I'll sell it. You want to put yourself in the best position to get the highest price.
Start today, no matter when you plan on selling.
Yep.
Clean up the books is the message.
Clean
up those books, folks.
Yeah.
Well,
okay.
Thank you again. This was great.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
We'll be back next Wednesday, 5 o'clock Eastern. Till then, everybody take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, y'all.